Hey friends, this is Mark Suroviec, host of the WorkPlay Solutions podcast, inviting you to discover the joy of work. Welcome to part 2. I'm here with Dr. Matt Champagne, who is a survey expert, serial entrepreneur, and guru in this field of helping build trust with your audience. So we're chatting with Matt. I was listening to a previous podcast you were on, and you mentioned some of the science about how there's a right way to do this. What are some other right ways you would share with us?
I do have a set of principles. I call them
Okay.
the 9 principles of customer feedback. We mentioned a couple of them. One is frequency and how often you survey and when you survey. And we talked about that. Before the event is best. Closing the loop is another one of those principles that we mentioned. One we haven't mentioned is purpose. Every ask should have a single purpose, because the goal is to get lots of people to respond to you. And we've all had those surveys where we think we know what the purpose of the survey is. They're like, oh, we just want to get your opinion on, your experience. And you're going along and there's more questions and more questions. And then they're like, okay, so how much money do you make? And do you have any decision-making authority? And you're like, oh, okay. I thought we were talking about my experience, staying at your hotel, but now we've changed purposes. People will drop out.
I've seen that firsthand being on multi-department projects where everyone's trying to get their own information. And there's this idea that a survey has to be like the Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all kind of thing. Like, we all need our stuff in this one. I'm like, you can have more than one survey. It's okay.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
But you just get this idea, it just becomes bloated. And I imagine this is what happens with legislation when folks just start trying to add in, well, we need our thing in there too. We need our thing in there too. And all of a sudden it's 1,000 pages. I've seen that play out as you try to build focused instruments to measure something. This group over here needs this information, and this group over here needs this information. It's very easy for that to balloon and balloon and balloon until you're responding to a 60-page something or 60 question something. It's like, what on earth? This took me 35 minutes. There's no...
Yeah. One of the worst I saw was with an organization who most people would know. I won't say their name, but they were going to send out a survey to their members, 113 questions. And doing what I do, which is critique surveys, I do it in my usual way. I told them, I've reviewed your survey. I have some suggestions of how we might fine tune these or modify it. And I'll never forget the woman who was in charge of that project. She said to me, Matt, if you change one question on that survey, I will take you to the mat. And I said, okay, I guess we'll keep it as it is. And of course, they got the results that anybody would have expected, right? About 2% response rate and most of the questions not filled in. It's easy to see from the outside, but apparently when you're on the inside in these organizations, it just seems so crucial to ask every single question that every leader in every department wants to know, but not if you're doing what I suggest is an alternative, the survey conversation. It's a conversation. You only ask one question or 2 questions, wait for that person to respond, and then you ask another question. They're not going anywhere. If you've done it well, you can ask all 113 questions if you like. It'll just take you a few months. But yeah, that's definitely a big problem in survey making.
I would not be surprised if an organization like that had 13 key initiatives or 11 business priorities. So
yes.
I meant to ask this earlier, and I want to make sure we get it. Do you have examples of just absolutely terrible questions that you've seen from your career of 9 kajillion surveys?
Gosh, yeah, so many that... Well, it used to be my all-time favorite, and by all-time favorite, I mean not my favorite, was the instructor is knowledgeable. And this would drive me crazy because it's found on evaluation forms from universities and evaluation forms from training programs. And that was the number one most popular question for all those years my instructor is knowledgeable, or my trainer is knowledgeable, or my trainer has expertise. So that's just an example of one of those where you're asking the wrong person, especially, if it's a new topic, or picture at a university where you're asking some 18-year-old kids, hey, how knowledgeable is your professor? So the professor gets the results back and they're kind of low. And she's thinking, oh, that's nice. I'm a world-renowned expert in this area. And some 18-year-olds are telling me I'm not knowledgeable. So there's plenty of those questions that you're asking the wrong person for the answer. That's a question that could be asked from your colleagues, or maybe someone sitting in on your training, or you have a focus group or something like that. So a lot of those are bad, that we're just asking the wrong people for their feedback. But some of these can be very subtle. There's a very popular question out there that you'll see before you go to a webinar or you register for some event. It will say, what's the biggest challenge you're facing? Horrible question.
Okay.
Because it's not, well, many things. One is it's not specific. When you ask a question, you want people to just give a response. It just triggers a response. So if you ask me, what's your biggest challenge? I might say, well, I don't know. I can't solve the Rubik's Cube in under 90 seconds.
Like my kids don't sleep at night.
Right. So yeah, you're thinking, well, are you talking about challenges in my financial world, with my spouse, with my kids at work? And you also told them, what's the biggest? And you never want to do that in a question. What's the most, the biggest? Because then people start thinking, they're like, okay, well, this is a problem. Well, is it my biggest? No, I don't know. Maybe it's my second biggest. You don't want people wandering off and thinking, because then they leave, and you want high response rate. So a way to ask this is, what is one challenge that you're facing in the finances of your business today? Or something of that sort. And then people can go, oh, I need to hire a developer, or I'm having trouble meeting payroll. When you ask in a very specific way, they can give you a snap answer, which is what you're going for. You want to know, well, what's on their mind, and they'll usually tell you the most important challenge. So that's one question to always avoid. What's the biggest challenge you're facing, or any variation of that?
Let's look at some of my favorite questions I like to ask. Who is someone that has helped you or supported you in your career? Can we thank them by name?
Oh, sure. I would love to. There's many folks. One in particular, his name is Joe Magno. What a great name. And he looks just like his name would sound, but he saw what I was doing when I was a professor at the university, and he ran a business in the city where the school was, saw what I did. He could see the benefit. He saw the whole picture. And he's one of these guys that would just go, all right, I'm going to introduce you to the chancellor of the school system. Oh, the state senator needs to know what you're doing. Let me introduce you to these folks from South Africa who have this great product. So he's just like this the most amazing connector I ever saw, but a selfless man. I don't recall him ever asking for anything in return for all he did and all the people he introduced me to. So big thank you to Joe Magno for sure.
Thank you, Joe. Tell us of a time you witnessed transformation with a group of people through the work that you were doing with that client.
I'll go back to one of the original ones. Was the reason that we started this whole process, which was while I was at the university. We were building what were actually the first surveys done online. There was no survey tools. We were using HTML code and the tools available at the time. But a big process at that time for our secretaries at the university was those course evaluation forms. You finish the course, everyone knows you fill in the bubbles and you write your comments. And we used to watch at the end of every term, our secretaries, Betty and Jean, and they were always together. So we just called them both Betty Jean. But Betty and Jean at the end of each term would be sliding, those through the Scantron machine, stacks and stacks of these sheets, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. They're still in the office, like scanning these through. And that was our first, inspiration. I was like, what are we doing to these ladies? We've got this new thing called the World Wide Web. We could put these same evaluations on the web. And it was such a crazy idea that it got funded by my university. And we were able to do that within our own university, is turn these forms into an online format so that Betty and Jean didn't have to spend 4 or 5 nights during the week. So it was meaningful to them, but it was a start of a much bigger transformation in all universities, because it took years and years, but eventually most universities switched over to an online format for asking questions of students.
Awesome. Probably my favorite question, because we like knowing that work is hard sometimes. So spin the wheel of embarrassing moments. Tell us a story of professional failure where you're the one that screwed up, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, gosh. I think that, when I look back, all the major mistakes I made all had the same theme, and that was I turned the decision over to somebody else. So I think back to like the 3 big events, like when I left and changed careers, and when I was going to sell my business, and when I had another big career. I thought, there are other people that know more than I do, so I'm going to bring them on board. And I just turned the decision over to them. And each time it was a catastrophically incorrect decision. And I thought to myself, I could have made that same wrong decision. It would have taken so much less time. But I didn't. I chickened out, and I gave it to somebody else who I thought was more knowledgeable or experienced to make the call. And they made the wrong call for me and for my family. And hopefully I've learned from this lesson now that on all the big decisions, make them yourself. As they say, take the shot. Don't pass the ball. Take the shot yourself. If you miss, you missed. And actually, in hindsight, I might have made the same decision myself, but at least I would have made it and not pass the ball to others.
Okay. What is a question you haven't been asked but are burning to answer?
I told you a little bit about Betty and Jean. It just made me think now about the people talk about their origin story and how things got rolling. I think maybe something relevant there is about what happened at the beginning. How did I get from the university to where I am? And along the way, we did some things that were kind of unusual that you look back today and you're like, oh, that's pretty typical. But back in, this would have been about 2000 or 2001, I hired mostly stay-at-home moms. And we did that for the first 6-7 years. And we got a lot of flack for that, because we had investors come in, they're like, oh, this will not do. You need to have real employees and you need a real location. And we had actually, some of us moved to Atlanta. So we had people in Atlanta and New York, one guy in Florida, one in DC. So we're actually doing a virtual company. This was 2001.
Wow.
And we got a lot of flack for that. They're like, whoa, this is not a real company, because everybody knows you need to be under the same roof. You have to have employees. But it's such a different era. You think back now, of course, everybody has a virtual company, and stay-at-home moms, of course, and virtual assistants and all that sort of thing. So I do look back with a little bit of pride on that it felt right. Even though we weren't in the same roof, it was fine. We all moved away. I had grad students and professionals that just moved on, but they never lost contact. They just stayed working with us from whatever location they were. And it worked all through email and instant message from Microsoft and the tool. We didn't have cell phones or anything, but the tools of the day, it worked. And then bringing on stay-at-home moms who could do customer support from their kids' football games and wherever they were from their laptops. I still use that model. So that was an interesting beginning for us, kind of a rocky start, but I think we were justified.
Fun stuff. So I don't know if we ever mentioned it. What is the name of your company?
Well, the original name was Embedded Assessments, which doesn't mean a whole lot to anybody. I've kept the name all these years, but I refer to it a lot now as just Survey Conversation, although that's not the official name of the company. That's captures all that we do in asking the right questions in the right way, building trust, and using the science that we know works to attract people and keep people in your audience. We call it keep your customers forever.
Love that.
How do you do that? Use survey conversation.
Okay. What are some things you have coming up in your world or things you would like to share with our audience as far as opportunities to improve their survey skill or learn more about these topics with you?
I try to work in seasons. The current season is helping to put together a tool that would more automate this process. I think that's one of the biggest questions we get is, okay, well, I could take one of your courses and learn how to apply this to my training program or to my live events or to my email list, even to inspire some conversation. But, can you do it for me? So we do a lot of done for you services, but it would be so much more scalable to get the word out there to automate so many of these processes. So that's where we are right now, is working on a program, some software that would accelerate this process and allow most people to quickly gather questions that would be in a database. Here are some good, valid questions to ask, and here's the results you would give to your audience to close the loop.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Final thoughts, and where can people find you?
Well, we put together a site for your audience that has that infographic I mentioned of the 9 principles. And I'd love for your audience to download that and then just compare it with what you're doing right now, your own survey, assessment, evaluation form. And I think if you see the 9 principles, you'll see the gaps that exist. And then it gives you some solutions to how to address those gaps. So you can get that by going to MatthewChampagne.com. That's my website. And then put /WorkPlay. That's an easy one to remember. MatthewChampagne.com/WorkPlay. And there's the infographic. And we practice some good psychology there. We're not asking for your name or email, like the free gift, which isn't really free. It actually is a free gift. Just go there and download it. But do contact me if it inspires some ideas.
And any social media where you're active?
Only LinkedIn. I dropped out of everything else some years ago. But find me on LinkedIn, just Matt Champagne. You'll find me there. I'd love to connect with you there and see what you're up to, and send me any challenges you have with getting people to respond to your survey to give you good, meaningful information, and I'll have some responses for you.
One thing you want folks to have in mind besides that call to action in terms of this topic?
One thing that's helped a lot of folks is just read your own work, which isn't really, like too deep, but we found that so often that people that, they're writing a survey or some questions, they want to gather some feedback from their audience. And I just stop them. I say, take a read through that as if you were the person filling it out. And almost invariably, they'll say, oh, wow, I can't believe, I would not answer this question myself. It's too long, or how is this related? And, they used to call it eating your own dog food back in back in the day. But that's a great tip, is just look at what you're sending to your people, to your own members, students, clients, patients, attendees, your own people, and see if you'd be willing to take time to fill that out, and fill it out deeply. Are the questions speaking to you? Is it clear? And that often removes a lot of the obstacles.
Fantastic. My guest today has been Dr. Matt Champagne, survey expert, scientist, researcher, professor, speaker, and entrepreneur, and visionary. So we are thankful for having you on the podcast today, Dr. Champagne.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Life is way too short for work to suck. So if you want help to build your team, train your team, or manage your team, we're here. Come see us at workplaysolutions.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.